So now that we've learned how to not rig the leg, let's talk about how to rig the leg. So we have our three controls in here, and I've backed this up to where we were when we first began, where we just have a peg for each of the body parts here, and the pivot points are where you would expect that pivot point to be. So like at the foot, it's at the ankle; for the calf, it's at the knee; for the upper leg, it's at the hip. Right. And I'm going to use a similar node that we used for our spaceship to get that squash and stretch, which is a constraint, a 2-point constraint. So I'm going to drag this in here, and you'll notice that we have three options coming out of the top. We have a switch. Let's not worry about that right now. And then we have left peg and right peg, right? And so what I would think of this instead is top peg and bottom peg. And so top peg and bottom peg. So for my upper leg, I'm going to have these two, my up leg and my calf peg, control that. So I'll disconnect from this, put that into left peg, and I'm not going to disconnect from calf because I still want it to control the bottom part of the calf, right? I just want it to also control the bottom part of the upper leg. So I'll plug that into there. So now I have those two pegs, and then I can plug this back into my leg control, and what I should have now is essentially an IK system for the upper leg. And since it is also still controlling the calf, this peg will allow us to keep that connected. So I can do the same for, if I move the foot, the foot's going to come disconnected. So I can do the same, adding another 2-point constraint here. I'll disconnect that for the calf, plug that in, and for the foot, I will have it go like this. So now the foot peg also controls the bottom half of the calf. And using these controls, I can now very quickly, if I wanted to, just position this foot however I need to, position this knee however I need to, and it all kind of stays connected. And the great part about this is if my body is moving up and down on this, the foot still stays locked in place. Now you're probably already seeing some of the issues with this. Let me go ahead and get rid of these keyframes. I'll hit F7 to get rid of them, get it back to my default pose. One of the bigger issues that I have with this is that when I move my knee forward, you'll see this happening. Right? And some of this can be, you can combat some of this by playing around with the options within the constraint, because the constraint is squashing and stretching this object. So we got volume max is set to 200, and maybe 100 will give you a better option. Distance max, or maybe even volume modifier. Right? We may be able to play around with these to get something a little bit more accurate, but I have never found any setting that just fixes everything, because I'm often pushing this rig to make it much more exaggerated. So what I'm going to do instead is give myself an additional control that allows me to correct for it. So it doesn't work well if I duplicate this control, primarily because it's already had some keyframes and stuff set on it. So I'm just going to select my 2-point constraint and say Control P, and that will create a new peg. And I'm going to rename this one to Control C to RCAF-P. I'll call this correct. Actually, let's put correct in front of it. I believe that's correct. And then I can rename this one just to RCraft-P and hit close. And I do want to make sure my pivot point is, again, pretty close to that center point there. And I can get it close enough by just selecting these back and forth and seeing that this one maybe needs to move down to there a little bit more. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wedge this one here. All right, hold down Alt and wedge that in there. And actually, I guess I kind of named these backwards. Actually, this one should probably be the one that has correct on it. Let's go ahead and call that corrected. And we'll just rename this one back to RCAF-P. And the reason for that is because whenever I move, this is probably going to be the one I animate the most to get my pivot point here. But whenever I get it to here and I start getting this overlap, I can use this correct now to put that knee back where it needs to be. So I'm using this to kind of correct for any distortion I get. There may be a chance that you'll have some of that happening in the ankle here too, and it wouldn't hurt to have an additional peg in between probably between these two. So we'll do like R foot correct or something like that if I start running into that issue. Currently, I think this one here will probably give me enough ability to correct the pose. And so it's not perfect, but it's another way that will allow us to have some control over that. Now, we've talked about some of our rigging that we have here so far, but now if I wanted to make my pair body, right, and if I moved my pair body up and down, right, and I wanted that to control my upper peg, that means when I'm animating my pair walking and moving it up and down, you're going to see that that body stays connected. And of course, I could connect that in with the face as well. Probably should get in there a little closer. And so now we should have sort of this fully functional body. So you're still seeing more things I need to connect, and I will be working on those in between.